Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. These are the words of a man who knew the depths of human suffering and the heights of human resilience. A man who, in the crucible of Auschwitz, didn't just survive, but found a way to thrive in spirit. His name was Viktor Frankl. And this is the story of how he, a Viennese psychiatrist, transformed the most horrific experience imaginable into a profound philosophy of meaning and hope. Imagine a world plunged into darkness, a world where millions are stripped of their names, their homes, their dignity, a world where the very fabric of humanity is torn to shreds. Now, imagine a single individual standing in the face of this abyss, not with despair, but with a quiet, unshakable resolve. This is the stage upon which Frankl's legacy was forged. Born in Vienna in 1905, Frankl was a precocious and brilliant young man. From an early age, he was fascinated by the question of meaning. While still in his teens, he began corresponding with Sigmund Freud, the titan of psychoanalysis, sharing his developing ideas. Frankl believed that while Freud's focus on the will to pleasure and Alfred Adler's focus on the will to power were important, they were incomplete. He proposed a third, more fundamental drive, the will to meaning. This wasn't just a theoretical concept for him. It was the very essence of what it meant to be human. His early career was marked by a passion for his work. As a neurologist and psychiatrist, he founded several youth counseling centers in Vienna, helping countless adolescents navigate the turmoil of their lives. He was a man of science, but also a deeply compassionate humanist, dedicated to alleviating the suffering of others. The 1930s saw Frankl's career flourish, but the shadow of Nazism was growing long over Europe. In 1938, the Anschluss, the annexation of Austria into Nazi Germany, changed everything. As a Jew, Frankl's life and work were now in peril. He was fired from his position at the hospital, and his medical practice was restricted to treating Jewish patients. Despite the looming danger, he refused to leave his aging parents behind. He even managed to get an American visa, but in a moment that would define his life's path, he chose to stay. He sought a sign, a reason to make such a difficult choice. On his desk, he found a piece of marble that his father had salvaged from the rubble of a synagogue destroyed by the Nazis. It contained a fragment of the Ten Commandments, specifically the commandment to honor thy father and thy mother. To Frankl, this was the sign he was looking for. His duty was to his family, not to his own safety. This act of selflessness, this choice rooted in meaning and duty, was a harbinger of the philosophy he would later formalize. In 1942, the inevitable happened. Frankl, his wife, his parents, and his brother were all arrested and deported to the Theresienstadt concentration camp. He entered a world where all his past achievements, all his worldly possessions were taken from him. He was no longer Dr. Viktor Frankl, the respected psychiatrist. He was prisoner number 119,104. In this new reality, surrounded by death and despair, he began to observe something remarkable. He saw that while the weak often perished, the strongest were not always the ones who survived. Survival, he noted, seemed to be tied to a person's inner state. It was a person's attitude, their capacity to find a reason to live, that was the ultimate determinant. He saw some prisoners in the face of starvation and brutality give up completely, losing all will to live. But he also saw others, clinging to a memory, a love, a hope for a future, who somehow found the strength to endure. Frankl's own inner world was his sanctuary. He would spend his days in the camps, not just physically laboring, but mentally reconstructing the manuscript of his book, a book on his revolutionary ideas which had been confiscated upon his arrival. He would imagine himself in a lecture hall after the war, teaching students about his experiences. He made a conscious decision to not only endure, but to observe and learn, turning his suffering into a scientific experiment, a living laboratory for his theories. He had found meaning in the suffering itself. He realized that when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. This was the fundamental principle of what would become logotherapy.
The concentration camp was a world designed to strip away everything. It was a place where hope was a luxury, and despair was the constant companion. Yet within these suffocating walls, Frankl began to see the true nature of the human spirit. He observed that those who surrendered to their circumstances, who allowed themselves to become mere numbers in a faceless crowd, were the first to perish. They lost not only their physical strength, but their inner will to live. But others, against all logic and reason, clung to a sense of purpose. A man might survive the brutal labor and starvation because he had a wife waiting for him. Another might endure because he had a scientific manuscript to finish. They had a why to live for, and that why gave them the strength to bear almost any how. Frankl himself found his why in two powerful anchors: his love for his wife, Tilly, and his commitment to his unfinished work. He would often close his eyes and conjure a vivid image of his wife, imagining their conversations, their shared life. He didn't know if she was alive, but the very act of holding on to that love, of keeping her memory alive within him, gave him an anchor in the storm. This internal world was a fortress no SS Bard could breach. He also clung to his professional identity. He became a mental health consultant to his fellow prisoners, offering a kind of makeshift therapy in the midst of horror. He would listen to their stories, their fears, and their hopes, helping them to find their own personal reasons to endure. He learned to read the signs of impending despair, noting that the loss of a future goal was often the most telling symptom. He knew that the ultimate form of resistance was not physical, but psychological. It was the refusal to let go of one's inner freedom, of the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. This was a direct refutation of the psychological determinism of his time, which suggested that humans were merely products of their biology and environment. Frankl saw firsthand that this was not true. He saw that even in the most extreme conditions, a person could still exercise a fundamental freedom, the freedom to choose their response. This freedom was the last bastion of human dignity, a light that could not be extinguished. As the war dragged on, Frankl was moved between multiple camps, including Kaufering and Turkheim. The conditions only worsened. He was forced into backbreaking labor, exposed to disease, and subjected to near starvation. He watched as his loved ones, including his wife and parents, were taken from him, their fates unknown. He was a man drowning in grief, yet he found a way to use that very grief as a tool for growth. He realized that a person's meaning could be found in three ways: through work, through love, and through the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering. The last of these, the way we choose to respond to suffering, was a revelation. It meant that even when all else is taken, a person can still find meaning, not despite the suffering, but within it. It's a radical idea, a concept that flies in the face of our natural inclination to avoid pain at all costs. But for Frankl, it was the key to survival. It was a form of self-transcendence, of stepping outside of one's own pain to find a higher purpose. He taught his fellow prisoners that they were not defined by their suffering, but by their reaction to it. They were not merely victims, they were co-authors of their destiny. In a place where hope had no logical place, Frankl planted the seeds of a new kind of hope, a hope rooted not in a promise of salvation, but in the unwavering belief in one's own capacity to choose. He understood that while the camp could destroy his body, it could never destroy his soul, his spirit, or his fundamental human freedom. He was, in the words of Nietzsche, a man who had a why to live and could therefore bear almost any how. His experiences were a living testament to this truth, a brutal but beautiful confirmation of his life's work.
The war, a long and brutal nightmare, finally came to an end. The Allied forces liberated the camps, and the prisoners, walking skeletons of their former selves, were finally free. But for many, the end of physical captivity was the beginning of a new internal struggle. Frankl, now a free man, was confronted with a series of devastating truths. He discovered that his wife, his parents, and his brother had not survived. The love that had been his anchor, the hope that had sustained him, was now a source of unbearable grief. The world he had left behind was gone, replaced by a void of loss and silence. This was the moment that would test his own philosophy to its core. How could a man find meaning in such profound and absolute loss? In this abyss of sorrow, Frankl did not succumb to nihilism. Instead, he chose to honor the memory of his loved ones by living a life of meaning. He realized that the love he had for them was not a fleeting emotion, but an eternal bond. No one could take that love or the memories he shared with them away. Their legacy, he decided, would live on through his work. This profound act of turning grief into purpose was the ultimate testament to his theories. He had found meaning in the attitude he took toward his suffering, transforming a personal tragedy into a universal message of hope. Returning to Vienna, Frankl found a city in ruins, both physically and spiritually. He was a survivor in a world of ghosts. The same week of his liberation, he began writing. The manuscript he had mentally reconstructed in the camps, a manuscript he had lost, was now poured onto paper in a furious, 3-day-long burst of creativity. The book, originally titled A Psychologist Experiences the Concentration Camp, would later be published as Man's Search for Meaning. It became a global phenomenon, a beacon of light in a post-war world struggling to comprehend the atrocities that had been committed. The book was a raw and honest account of his experiences, but it was much more than a memoir. It was a philosophical treatise, a guide for how to live a life of purpose even in the face of immense suffering. He argued that the primary motivation for humans is not the pursuit of pleasure, as Freud believed, but the will to meaning. He introduced the world to logotherapy, a form of existential analysis that focuses on helping individuals find meaning in their lives. Logotherapy is built on 3 core tenets. The first is that life has meaning in all circumstances, even the most miserable ones. The second is that we have the freedom to find meaning in every situation. And the third is that we are all responsible for the meaning we find. These ideas, born in the darkness of the Holocaust, resonated with millions. They offered a new way of thinking about life, a way that honored the human capacity for growth and resilience. Frankl's message was not one of forced optimism, but of responsible hope. It was a message that said, yes, life is difficult. Yes, there will be pain and suffering, but you have the power to choose your response. You have the power to find meaning. He became a celebrated figure, traveling the world to lecture and teach. He was a man of peace, a man who had every reason to be filled with hatred, but instead chose to be a force for good. He taught that we are not passive victims of fate, but active participants in the creation of our lives. He showed that the human spirit, when anchored by purpose, is truly unbreakable. His journey from a prisoner in Auschwitz to a global thought leader is a testament to the power of his own ideas. He was a living embodiment of the principles he espoused,
a man who had walked through hell and emerged with a message of profound hope for all of humanity. Viktor Frankl's message was not confined to lecture halls and textbooks. It found its way into the hearts and minds of ordinary people, offering a lifeline in a world increasingly grappling with a sense of meaninglessness. As the post-war era gave way to the complexities of the late 20th century, Frankl's insights became more relevant than ever. The material comforts of the modern world, he argued, could not fill the spiritual void. He spoke of a new kind of neurosis, a neurogenic neurosis, that arose not from psychological conflict, but from a lack of meaning and purpose. He believed this was the fundamental crisis of our time. Think about it. We have more choices, more information, and more freedom than any generation before us. Yet, for many, this abundance has led to a feeling of emptiness, of being adrift without a compass. Frankl's philosophy provides that compass. He taught that meaning is not something to be invented, but something to be discovered. It's a concept he illustrated through a simple but powerful analogy. He would tell his students that life asks us questions, and it is our responsibility to answer them, not with words, but with our actions. The answers we give form the unique and irreplaceable meaning of our lives. But how do we find these answers in our day-to-day lives? Frankl identified three primary paths to meaning. The first is through work, by creating something or doing a deed. This isn't just about having a job, it's about finding purpose in what you do, whether it's building a bridge, writing a poem, or raising a family. It's about leaving a mark on the world, however small. The second path is through love, by experiencing something or encountering someone. Frankl believed that love is the highest and most profound way to find meaning. In loving another person, we see them in their full potential, and we help them to realize that potential. Love is not just an emotion, it is an act of seeing and affirming the meaning in another's life. And the third, and perhaps most challenging path, is through our attitude toward unavoidable suffering. We've already seen how Frankl found meaning in the camps, but this principle applies to all forms of suffering. Illness, loss, disappointment. Frankl taught that while we may not be able to control our circumstances, we always have the freedom to choose our attitude toward them. This choice is where we find our ultimate power and dignity. He shared a story of a patient, an elderly man, who was depressed after the death of his wife. Frankl asked him, "What would have happened if you had died first and your wife had to live without you?" The man responded, "That would have been terrible for her." Frankl then said, "You see, by surviving her, you have spared her that suffering. In a way, you are now suffering for her." The man immediately saw a new meaning in his pain, and his despair began to lift. This simple, profound reframing is the essence of Frankl's work. It's not about ignoring pain, but about finding a purpose within it. Frankl lived a long and incredibly productive life. He became a professor, wrote over 30 books, and received numerous awards and honorary degrees. He even became an avid mountain climber in his later years, a physical metaphor for his life's journey of overcoming immense obstacles. He married again and found a new family, a testament to his belief in the human capacity for love and renewal. His life was a living example of his philosophy. He was not a man who simply wrote about meaning, he was a man who lived it, who embodied it in every choice he made, from his selfless decision to stay with his parents in 1942 to his tireless work helping others find their own purpose. He showed us that the search for meaning is not a grand, abstract quest, but a series of small, conscious choices made every single day.
Viktor Frankl passed away in 1997 at the age of 92, but his legacy is more vibrant today than ever before. His ideas have transcended the fields of psychology and philosophy to become a source of inspiration for people from all walks of life. From business leaders seeking to instill purpose in their organizations to individuals battling depression, his message of meaning has provided guidance and hope. Frankl's work gave rise to a new school of thought, one that placed human beings not as puppets of their environment or their subconscious, but as free, responsible agents. He showed us that our greatest power lies in our ability to choose our attitude, define the sense of purpose, and to live a life that transcends our own suffering. His book, Man's Search for Meaning, continues to be a bestseller, a testament to its timeless relevance. It is a book that every generation rediscovers, a manual for living a meaningful life in an increasingly complex and often chaotic world. Frankl's insights have been echoed by countless others, from Nelson Mandela, who found inner strength in the face of apartheid, to everyday heroes who overcome personal tragedies with quiet dignity. They are all living proof of the truth he discovered in the camps, that our circumstances do not define us. Our response to them does. The journey of Viktor Frankl, from a young, ambitious psychiatrist in Vienna to a prisoner in Auschwitz, and finally to a global icon of hope, is one of the most powerful human stories ever told. It is a story of a man who looked into the abyss and, instead of seeing only darkness, saw a flicker of light, a flicker of meaning, of purpose, and of human dignity. He taught us that while we cannot always control what happens to us, we can always control how we react. He showed us that even in the face of utter despair, we have a profound responsibility. A responsibility to live, to love, and to find a reason for being. This is the ultimate lesson of Frankl's journey. It's a call to action for each of us, a call to stop waiting for life to hand us meaning and to start actively seeking it out. It's an invitation to ask ourselves, not, what do I want from life, but what does life want from me? So, what is your answer? What is your purpose? What is the unique and irreplaceable mark that only you can leave on the world? Frankl's life is a reminder that the answer to these questions is not found in fame or fortune, but in the small, everyday choices we make. The choice to be kind, the choice to be courageous, and the choice to never, ever give up on our search for meaning.